Welcome to today's TCG Consulting and SAP Concur workshop, Managing T&E Through COVID and Beyond. I'm Christy Harner, the Marketing Advisor at TCG Consulting. And I just want to thank you and commend you for taking the time out of your day to listen, discuss, and take away new tactics for overcoming T&E maturity and stagnation, and for building a solid post-COVID plan for your company and learning more about increasing your company's spend under management. So I will go ahead and hand the webinar over to Paul, who will introduce himself and begin our conversation.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Paul Fernandez. I'm the Associate Director for TCG Consulting in the EMEA region. Thank you also to SAP Concur for providing us with the opportunity and bringing everyone together today. We're excited to be presenting today, and we hope that you'll find the content valuable and at least take one or two or three things away with you today that you can apply to your own T&E strategy. With that, I'd just like my colleague Edward to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Edward Curtis. I'm the Associate Director for TCG Consulting's Expense and Invoice Management practice, overseeing our team of certified implementation resources for SAP Concur. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Edward. As you can see, we're well covered today. I'm based in the UK and Edward's over on the East Coast in the US. So we're well covered from a global perspective in terms of subject matter expertise. Now, there will be a very small amount of audience participation. We've got a few questions ahead of each of the sections, so that will help guide some of the content that we'll be discussing today. So we'll ask you to put your answers in the chat, and we'll analyze those throughout the workshop as we progress forward. Now, today's agenda, we're going to cover a very brief overview of TCG Consulting and our partnership with SAP Concur. This will be covered by a short video, which I hope you'll enjoy. We'll be doing a section on getting to know each other, so understanding how our company priorities may have changed through COVID and beyond. We're going to look at the impact of COVID and how companies have reallocated their program priorities. We're going to look at the importance of stakeholder engagement and how that applies to and plays into organizational transformation. And then we'll also be talking about shifting the lens on our spend beyond traditional T&E spend management and looking at TCO TMPE, which is a fundamental TCG consulting concept, and SUM, which is a broad spend under management methodology. We'll be talking about what that looks like. On the next slide, we'll be looking at our objectives. So just briefly, during the video today, you'll see some of the benefits of working with a CIP, Certified Implementation Partner, what TCG is with Concur, SAP Concur, working with one and how that can help transform, integrate and optimize your program across travel, meetings, payment and expense, whilst working in conjunction with SAP Concur. We'll understand how COVID may have impacted your organization priorities, from the rapid deployment to home working and the impact it's had on getting things done. Perhaps your business was deemed business critical, with the need to adapt quickly so business can continue whilst mitigating risk and risks to the workforce. We'll learn a little bit about TMP programs and how they sit on the maturity scale. We'll do a section on know which stakeholders are key to your transformation initiatives and how it's important to broaden your stakeholder group to successfully drive change within your organization and foster an optimized end-to-end program, connecting front-end travel, meetings and payment to back-end expense reimbursement and reporting. And then learn something about our innovative solutions that will help your organization manage, optimize a TMP program with a shift in approach that will drive deeper savings, scalable and efficiency workflow, and improve productivity and drive cost out. Now, with that, if there's no questions at this point or any objections, I'd like to move on to section 1, our TCG overview and SAP Concur partnership history.
When it comes to corporate travel program strategy and management, accepting the status quo is simply not good enough. 82% of organizations classify their travel program as mature, stagnant, and providing diminishing returns. Yet a significant percentage of company revenues are still attributed to T&E related costs. We all know it's time to drive change. As the global leader for strategic advisory and management services since 1994, TCG Consulting is driving organizational transformation, integration, and the optimization of travel, meetings, payment, and expense, also known as TMPE. With TCG, successful leaders from numerous stakeholder groups can help their organization increase their competitive advantage through the adoption of an end-to-end program, eliminate user bypass, and increase spend visibility company-wide, including employee-initiated, direct, or discretionary costs. But it's not just visibility and spend that's important. The adoption of a broad spend under management platform with commercial payment expansion can derive repeatable, scalable revenue benefits, mitigate risk, increase user acceptance, and even streamline workflows. Our global team at TCG has completed thousands of successful engagements for hundreds of companies in over 160 countries to help manage and transform their understanding and approach to TMPE. These unique strategies are driven by TCO TMPE, TCG's patented total cost of ownership for travel, meetings, payment, and expense, which is comprised of 18 cost components designed to measure all sources of program management and delivery, investments, workflows, and reporting. With a TCO TMPE approach to strategy and management, we're able to align broader organizational strategic imperatives with a new approach that identify and capture hidden costs, generate new and incremental savings, and increase broad spend under management. In just a few months of working together, your organization could already be on the path to managing and capturing spend at 4.5 times your current reimbursed T&E through broad spend under management. And it all begins with a conversation. Let TCG understand, benchmark, then create, implement, and/or manage your strategy to unify and optimize TMPE and drive solutions far beyond today's emerging challenges, confidently, client-centric, and value-driven, together.
Great, we hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's a lot to take in the 3 minutes, but we'll be covering aspects of it throughout our time today. How to build a user acceptance model, understanding bypass and alternative spend platforms, and how shifting your lens and approach can drive deeper savings and reduce the total cost of ownership of your program. So section 2, let's get to know each other. The objective here is to understand how your organization's priorities may have shifted due to COVID and into the future. So the next slide, we have a quick question, a quick polling question. So has COVID changed or shifted your company priorities? It's either a yes or a no. And then the second question, how would you prioritize the following key program elements? 1 being the highest priority, 4 being the lowest priority. So our elements are scalability, leveraging savings, safety and duty of care, and business continuity. So we'll just give you a moment to enter those answers into the chat, and then we'll discuss further how your company's priorities have shifted and what the market's telling us. Okay, great. Thanks for answering those. So as we can see, yes, COVID has changed and shifted your company's priorities. And it looks as though business continuity is number 1 in terms of highest priority, safety and duty of care, number 2, scalability is number 3, and leveraging savings number 4. Moving on to the next slide, understanding priorities and the shift of company priorities due to COVID. COVID has propelled, as we are aware, the digital transformation and has uncovered deficiencies within organizations in terms of their automated workflow and how that would enable a workforce. Pre-COVID, leveraging savings was the most important priority in terms of category management, squeezing savings out of vendors in terms of negotiating with airlines and hotels, car rental companies, etc. Scalability, business continuity, and safety and duty of care then followed afterwards in that suite. Going forward and now and into the future, business continuity is number 1. How do we keep moving? How do we keep growing? How do we cover all the gaps that we have due to manual process, whether it's approval workflow, payment and reimbursement process, and still maintain control of all our employee initiated spend? Safety and duty of care and traveler wellness and user wellness has come in second place now. It's now essential to manage all travel at the onset the thought of having a traveller travel to either an amber country or a high-risk country and return to a manufacturing plant testing positive doesn't even bear thinking about in terms of what that impact might have on the business. So understanding where our travellers are going, where they've been, and how we manage that process is even more critical now. So safety and duty of care has gone from number 4 priority to a number 2. Leveraging savings is number 3, and then scalability, number 4. We've also seen a propulsion in virtual payment and integration of payment into expense and even on the front end travel as well. And there's lots of opportunities there in terms of integrating and broadening spend management through payment vehicles and optimizing the rebates that might be available within that. The next slide is a sample of what program prioritization might look like. And we're looking at 5 different elements. Now, if we were together in a room today, I'd probably give you a bag with 100 marbles and ask you to separate those marbles into these 5 elements. So we have strategic imperatives, which are essentially your company's objectives, then your mission, and aligning, understanding what those are. And is your program today aligned with your company's or your organization's strategic imperatives? User acceptance is how are my users going to feel about this program? What's the customer experience feel like? Does the technology and the workflow enable them? Profitability, productivity, and then savings. So pre-COVID, similar to the previous slide, 1 being the most important, 5 being the least, savings was a number 1 priority. User acceptance, you'll see pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID remains at a number 2. Strategic imperatives is aligned at number 3, and profitability and productivity, number 4 and 5 pre-COVID. If we look at post-COVID, it's now imperative that our programs are aligned with our organization's strategic imperatives. And that goes back to the elements that we looked at earlier from business continuity, understanding that our programs are aligned with what our business needs to do, which is continue to function and drive profitability. So the alignment of our programs now really need to be connected at the highest level in terms of our CFOs and CPOs, and really having that strong alignment with the strategic imperatives will now drive a truly robust integrated program. User acceptance remains at number 2. Savings actually dropped from 1 to 4 pre-COVID to post-COVID. And we'll see that as we integrate and optimize, our savings from traditional category management will diminish, but the benefits of integrated workflow and the productivity and efficiency driven by that will generate those savings naturally. And profitability, number 5. With that, we're going to move to another question where we're going to have some audience participation, and it's understanding how do you manage your travel, meetings, payment, and expense programs today? Are they siloed? Are they managed independently? Does travel and payment manage together? Does meetings sit out on its own? Is payment and expense managed together or not at all? So we've got some answers here. It's no, yes, partial, or I don't know. So we'll just give you a moment to answer those in the chat. Great, so we've got some mixed reviews there. We've got travel and payment, which is managed together. We've got some integration of payment into expense, whilst it looks as though there's integration, but again, the programs are managed separately. And a couple of partials on the travel and meetings as well. What we'd like to do now is go through our program maturity stages, or the 5 stages of program maturity on the next slide. As we walk through this, think about your organization and where your T&E program might sit on the maturity scale. So our 5 stages, we've got unmanaged, emerging, evolving, mature, and optimized. And the characteristics within each level of maturity and how the components are managed, whether it be policy or category management or duty of care or payment and expense integration, that will determine the level of maturity and how a program progresses. Now, the level of maturity also leads to fundamental change in spend platform management. And you'll see those, they're depicted by the icons down in the bottom right-hand corner. We've got a spend platform, which is called direct agency, GL, TCO, and SUM. And we will go into a bit more detail on these in some further slides. But just to give you an idea of what that means right now, is direct is anything that your agency is managing today. So that's anything that they're able to transact on, which is air, car rental, rail, and hotel. Your GL is anything that hits your GL, your general ledger. So that could be your expense reports, but it will also include any direct vendor payments that might come through on Invoice and AP. So that's 100% of your T&E spend, essentially. TCO is total cost of ownership. These are additional hidden costs, which are beyond your GL. So you've got your 100% GL, and then you're going to have an additional costs associated with managing GL that don't sit on a T&E budget, but hidden costs like cost of audit, cost of consulting, cost of systems and solutions. And then SUM is spend under management, which is looking at spend beyond T&E and looking at all employee initiated spend and B2B and how that might be managed through a procure to pay strategy and payment term strategy, etc. So now I'd just like to look at some of the actual levels of maturity and work through those with you. Just flick back again, Christy. So unmanaged might be a receipt-based reimbursement with no policy, no supplier contracts in place, no or limited agency, and no traveler tracking. So completely unmanaged, no visibility on spend, no possibility of driving savings, etc. An emerging program might be limited supplier contracts, no or limited OBT adoption. Agency is the consolidator of your data. So they're only reporting on the data that they can capture, which again is the direct spend, which is air, rail, hotel, and car. High air and hotel bypass, and then fragmented or regional management, even down to policy level. So we'd be managing a direct platform there, although not very well. An evolving program maturity would be, we'd have effective supplier contracts where we're negotiating with air and hotel suppliers and car rental, etc. We'd have a category sourcing plan led by procurement. We have a corporate T&E and PCAR program, which provides tier 1 reporting and limited expense integration from front-end travel and payment. We're still managing a direct platform, but moving into the GL platform as now we have expense and card. In a mature program, we now have broad strategic program oversight, comprehensive global T&E policy, which has been consolidated. We are now addressing compliance and duty of care. However, our traditional sourcing and savings are now exhausted, just due to the fact that we've now negotiated as much as we can with our vendors. We now need to look for other opportunities to drive savings for our program. And we've also got T&E linked with cardable spend. So we're looking at spend beyond just what's processed on an expense report. In an optimized program, we're fully aligned with our company strategic imperatives. We're moving into a TCO TMPE model where we're looking at those hidden costs beyond the expense report. We're integrating travel, meetings, payment, and expense, and looking to fully capture spend under management beyond T&E into employee initiated spend, and looking to optimize workflow at a level 2. The next slide, I'd like to look at the progression of program maturity across travel, meetings, payment, and expense, and what that might look like as we're managing independently and as we manage into an optimized state. If we look at travel, a level, we can just key through the bar chart's perfect. If we look at travel, a level 8 here in terms of maturity level might only suggest that we're a 6 overall across meetings, payment and expense as well. So again, maturity in travel suggests that we've exhausted all possible contract negotiations with vendors, and we need to now start to look elsewhere and how we can drive those savings and opportunities. So how do we do that? We do that by integrating travel, meetings, payment and expense. Meetings is largely an area of opportunity. We see that there's lots of opportunities. It's a category that potentially might sit within various business units in an organization. There's opportunities to create synergies between travel and meetings, and obviously leverage payment as well to pay for those vendors. As we click through to optimized, we see that whilst we've exhausted everything in travel, we're now moving to an optimized state by integrating travel, meetings, payment and expense. And we're lifting the whole program up. So now that we're at a 9 on travel, you can see that expenses also increased, payment is also increasing, and meetings is as well. And we'll talk a little bit about, in a few slides time, how we would look at integrating TMPE. With that, I'd like to pass over to Edward now to talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement and how that impacts digital transformation in organizations.
Great, thank you, Paul. So for this section on stakeholder engagement, we want to start by asking the audience another survey question. So how many stakeholders in your organization participate in your joint TMPE strategy? So the answers that we have are A, 1 to 5, B, 6 to 10, C, 10 plus, and D, we don't have a joint strategy team. So we're going to pause for a moment and allow you to put your responses in the chat. Okay, so it looks like everyone has had a chance to respond to our survey questions, so thank you very much. It looks like most people responded with option A, 1 to 5, with a handful of companies selecting option B, 6 to 10. As companies look and how they're managing their current travel, meetings, payment, expense programs, most companies today probably think about the travel manager managing the travel space, your AP or finance teams managing the expense pays, and not necessarily how these items are being jointly managed together. So moving to the next slide, what we can see is as companies continue to progress along our 5 stages of program maturity, from that unmanaged state that Paul showed us earlier, all the way to the evolving, mature, and even optimized state, we're beginning to engage more individuals across your organization, as we're now touching in what Paul will describe later on for our total cost of ownership and spend under management methodologies. We're starting to touch more spend across the organization. So we're no longer just dealing with a travel management and the travel manager, or our information technology team, or our expense team. We're now dealing with people such as our legal team that's reviewing contracts, our marketing and corporate communications as they're managing change management across our organization, treasury and tax. Again, a big focus on IT and how these programs are integrating together with the big push towards digitalization. So creating that integrated, digitalized workflow that used to be maybe more siloed and separated and more manual in the past. So as we can see on our screen here, whether you're forming a T&E council or perhaps just a steering committee or a leadership committee focused on the strategy across travel, meetings, payment, and expense, it's important to get representation across the board so that decisions are being made together, as we are now really impacting many areas of your organization. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Paul Fernandez to lead us through TCG's total cost of ownership, methodology, and spend under management.
Thanks, Edward. So the intro to TCO, TMP, and spend under management methodology, I'd first like to kick off with a question. And that question is, do you find it difficult to identify and manage all the costs associated with your TMPE program? So yes or no. And it looks like the answer is yes across the board. So, and rightly so, there's a lot of hidden costs associated with managing travel, meetings, payment and expense, and even more so now with COVID, that there's brand new unique requirements. We're also seeing a big drive in terms of sustainability as well, which is actually driving additional costs in terms of managing programs and managing to sustainable targets, so which I'll talk to about in a second. On the next slide, we want to look at integrating travel, meeting, payment and expense and the benefits of that solution and how that's underpinned by a TCO strategy focused on the company's strategic imperatives. Now, this would lead to optimizing a program. It would obviously drive deeper savings as we work together in an integrated program, broaden opportunities in terms of spend management, and help organizations understand their true total cost of ownership and where the hidden costs lie in terms of cost takeout. So connecting travel, meetings, payment and expense. Travel and meetings, there are some synergies in terms of operations, service delivery, supplier agreements, technology, etc. Across those. Meetings and payment and travel payment, payment has accelerated over the last 18 months or so. There's some really unique things that are happening in the payment industry. Virtual card has certainly propelled significantly. The enhanced data that's available there and the integration of that data into expense systems and invoice systems is like what we've never seen before. So integrating travel, meeting, payment, looking at T&E cards, P cards, cash advances, virtual payment, and then looking beyond T&E spend in terms of Miro spend and indirect, and ensuring that we've got really good payment strategies in place and good terms with our vendors so that we can maximize the benefits and the rebates that might be available to us. That would then flow into expense or invoice to enhance the reconciliation process and also the expense creation process, budgeting, audit, compliance, client management and reporting. So we have an ecosystem, let's say, that's connected by technology, policies and workflow that really will drive user acceptance to the program. It will enhance the user's experience. It will drive NPS and provide us with really good visibility on where our hidden TCO costs are, so that we can look at those and really start removing some of that extra cost. The next slide, I'd like to go into TCO in a little bit more detail and help you understand how we measure TCO in a travel, meetings, payment and expense program. We have 18 components of TCO within a TMPE program, and they're essentially separated out into 4 pillars, which are management and delivery, investment, workflow process, and controls reporting. Now, on average, TCO costs can range anything between 8% and 23% above a T&E budget. So let's say if you had a T&E budget of £100 million, your TCO costs associated with managing that spend and the programs connected to it could be anything from 8 million to 23 million pounds. There's some really big numbers. And these numbers don't sit on a T&E budget. They don't sit in the expense report. They're hidden costs that could be associated with, let's say, your travel agency fees, or it could be cost of investment, for example, the cost of maybe bringing on in a consultant to strategize and on your digital transformation plan. It could be the cost of audit or the cost of procurement, who is looking at all those airline contracts and negotiating those contracts for us. Now, these are all costs that are hidden, that are not sitting on a T&E budget, but are costs that can be streamlined and taken out, or at least reduced as we integrate travel, meetings, payment and expense. I mentioned sustainability earlier. That's our 18th component. It's brand new. Where I think we've been going with it for 6 months, but understanding that this is a really big initiative right now globally, understanding what our footprint looks like and understanding how to report on it and how to do better as organizations. The cost of managing sustainability is really driving the TCO costs up at the moment, and that's one that we're really looking at. The next slide we'll look at, it's almost a sample case study of what the benefits provide of managing a TCO TMP strategy. This example here is a global consumer product leader. They're based in 175 countries, 100 offices around the world, 40,000 employees, and they had TCO costs of 54 million plus per year. So that, again, TCO is the cost that sits on top of the GL budget, that's on top of the T&E GL budgets. These are hidden costs. And we had engagement from the CFO and the CPO, who understood that they had an opportunity, let's say, to improve the way they were working, to prioritize and drive cost takeout and develop a company-centric program in doing so. They had a partially managed upfront travel program with about 36% of the spend going through the agency. Now, on average, we would expect that to be 59% in a mature state, with about 11% bypass. They have an OBT, but it did need a little bit of optimization, and they needed to drive MPS. What we did in terms of the TCO TMP strategy, we started off with an assessment and an assessment to review all components of the travel, meetings, payment and expense programs, and developed a 3-year strategy and developed a TCO cost ownership projection. And that's where we found the 54 million in TCO spend that they were spending beyond the GL. We introduced a travel management BPO immediately, and components of that led into deploying or rewriting policy, deploying a procurement SMEs to renegotiate with their airline contracts, and there was integration with the booking, front-end booking to expense, and actually most recently we also added in request, so pre-trip, into that process as well, and that was due to COVID. And then there was huge change management drive through the BPO resources that were assigned to this client to train and educate the users on the new program. What this actually meant was that we identified $15.3 million in savings. We did reduce their bypass to 7%. And there was also 2 million in incremental savings just through some optimization work that we did with Concur in terms of workflow improvements, and some further deployment into other markets where Concur hadn't been fully deployed, and just optimization through some of the functions within the expense system as well. And there was also some direct supplier savings of 1.5 million incremental through the category management. The next slide, if we could look at integration to SUM and what that means in terms of our methodology and our approach. So SUM is broad spend under management. So we look at integrated TMPE, TCO TMPE, and broad spend under management is that final platform of spend, that opportunity, which really is looking at any spend beyond the T&E expense report, understanding that we have vendor payment strategy in place, that we're understanding how we're paying our vendors, and looking at everything that's B2B and employee-initiated spend that lies unmanaged today. Now, examples of that might be indirect or related T&E spend purchased by, say, interviewees or contractors that might not be flowing through your system, but you still get billed for it on an invoice. There could be ad hoc supplier technology and licenses and fees, or other office services like overnight freight or office supplies and hardware. Now there's opportunity to really analyze that type of spend and drive self-funding models by enabling a sum platform, and that would be looking at enhancing visibility, looking at payment term strategy with those vendors, and understanding the payment type that is appropriate for that vendor and how that would bring in some rebates back to your organization through some smart shifting of payment types. With that, I'd now like to pass over to Edward to walk us through the evolution of the spend platforms and savings that each of the different platforms can drive.
Great, thank you, Paul. As companies continue to progress along those different stages and manage spend in these different spend platforms, you are taking on more costs throughout your organization that you're managing, but the benefit of getting more visibility is it leads to your ability to be more strategic and drive more incremental savings. So just to illustratively show how each spend platform manages a certain amount of spend is typically if you view what is reimbursed on the general ledger, as that is 100% of your T&E spend. Typically about 70% of that spend could be managed through the travel agency, either for what is directly booked through the travel agency or what we consider bypass and is booked outside, perhaps directly with different supplier sites. That is what would be managed in a direct platform spend platform. If we then move to the G&L and T&E platform, that is where you're managing, again, 100% of your T&E spend. By adopting a total cost of ownership spend platform, you're beginning to manage that additional spend that's still related to your program and potentially the cost of managing these programs, from reviewing legal contracts, from the audit of expense reports, things that would not be on an actual expense report like in SAP Concur. And as Paul mentioned before, our benchmark being that is 14% above GL spend. Lastly, with our spend under management platform, this is where you're really looking at all spend potentially related to the program and just outside of the program, whether it be B2B spend, areas that you can potentially find additional dollars that could be run through your card program to drive additional incremental rebates to help self-fund many projects within your organization. This can be as high as 4.5 times the amount reimbursed on the general ledger. So now moving to our next slide, we have another, I believe our final audience participation question. And that's, what T&E spend platform does your organization manage today? So our different options being, if you recall from our previous slides, agency, the corporate card expense GL level, TCO or total cost of ownership at 114%, or spend under management. And I believe we have one more option for I don't know. So we'll pause here for a moment, give you a chance to answer in the chat, and then we'll review those results together. Great, it looks like everyone has had an opportunity to respond, and what we typically see is what I'm seeing reflected here in our results. So most organizations are managing at really the agency level, with some in the corporate card expense or GL level as well. So that really lets you know where the areas are to continue to progress along those different stages of spend platform. So as we move to our next slide, we covered from sort of a percentage of total spend, where each spend platform sits. But now to help you visualize a little bit better using actual pounds or dollars for our illustration, for an organization that has about $100 million or £1 million in T&E expenses, If you look, then that direct platform of 70% would be about 70 million pounds. So 59 million is typically our benchmark then through your direct with the agency, with about 11% bypassing that program, so 11 million pounds. Your corporate card spend is typically about 62% of what is reimbursed on the general ledger, so about 62 million pounds. And then showing where total cost of ownership managing at that platform could capture up to 114 million pounds. And then really adopting that final spend management stage of the spend under management across your organization can be anywhere around 450 million pounds. So certainly that could seem like a daunting number, but again, the benefit of being able to manage all this spend in one place, in one program, is it allows you to be more strategic and really impact your organization to find the areas of leverage savings to really increase the bottom line of your company and allow you to run much more efficiently. So now moving to our next slide. I mentioned before that spend under management can really mean anything across your organization, but one key component within spend under management is trying to find the cardable spend opportunities. So areas that you might not think could historically go on a corporate card program. Companies are finding that, especially identifying different B2B payments where they're paying specific or strategic vendors, that where typically this might have been paid through the invoice and cutting a check and sending to that supplier, if we're able to drive that spend through a card program, it has the ability to allow you to hit these additional tiers with your corporate card providers and driving those additional rebates back into your organization that can really be used for a variety of reasons. Perhaps it's to fund additional initiatives across your organization. Perhaps it's to reinvest back into your spend management platform. Perhaps it's just simply to keep those savings and improve your bottom line. But some of the areas that organizations are beginning to focus on to try and identify these additional cardable opportunity areas are any indirect or related T&E costs. So again, those supplier direct bills that I just mentioned. Office and real estate services. Really low frequency or high frequency but low amount spend, perhaps could those be driven through a purchase card program. Any technology and IT suppliers. Any non-employer people costs, so professional services such as a consultant or legal teams. Any company purchases related to office supplies. Meetings and events, putting those through an actual corporate card, as well as any marketing and communications. So that was a lot of information that we covered with you today. So to really summarize and wrap up today's presentation, I want to pass it back to Paul Fernandez. Paul?
Thank you, Edward. Appreciate it. I hope that mentioned at the beginning that hopefully there'll be at least one or two things that you'll take away from today's session. What did we learn today? So the first question was, did COVID impact us and change the way we're working? The answer was yes. COVID impacted us significantly, both at work and in personal life. We had to adapt very quickly. Business continuity became our number one priority, followed very closely by duty of care and traveler wellness and user wellness, savings, and then scalability. We learned about program maturity and the five stages of program maturity. Essentially, what happens if we don't progress into an optimized state? What happens if we stay at a mature state and we no longer have any opportunities to negotiate savings with vendors? Well, what will happen was that our T&E spend will ultimately increase. Year over year, prices will increase by 1.9% or so, and our 100 million budget will now be 101.9 million. So moving our spend lens from a direct platform to GL, to TCO, to sum is crucial in terms of being able to drive savings and improve that bottom line for your organization. The spend platform shift is essential It's part of digital transformation. It will uncover 18 components of hidden costs that are connected to your program today and drive out those savings and drive out those hidden costs and bring savings to the organization. The Sum platform, as we talked about, Edward talked about just now, has components of cardable spend, payment types, and opportunities in terms of rebates, and again, enhance workflow into expense and invoice that again will bring money back into the organization that you can either reposition, use for self-funding digital transformation, or just merely improving your bottom line. We hope that today was valuable for you as you learned about integrated TMPE, TCO, and Sum, and that you have been able to apply some of the learnings today, and that you'll be able to take that away to your own T&E strategies. We look forward to being able to have future discussions with you. If there's any aspects of today's presentation that you'd like to go through, again, we're more than welcome to take your emails and your phone calls. And with that, I'd just like to thank you for your time and thank Edward for co-hosting and Christy and the marketing team for helping us put this together today, and also to SAP Concur for providing us with the opportunity.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Edward. Thanks for everybody for attending our workshop today on managing T&E through COVID and beyond. As Paul just mentioned, our team would love to speak with you after the event or in the future for those who may be watching this workshop post-event. We'd also love to run any customized workshop for you and your whole team as you manage your T&E strategy in the future. As a takeaway, we'll be sending some of the material that you've seen here, along with some complimentary material about TCG, to all the attendees and anyone else who requests them. And again, as we've mentioned, for more information about TCG Consulting and for more information about our partnership with SAP Concur and how we can help you optimize your travel, meetings, payment, and expense program post-COVID, please feel free to check out our website, tcgconsulting.net, or send one of us an email, maybe Paul Fernandez. You can see his email on the screen. And thanks again. We look forward to speaking with you again in the near future. Take care.